Hi, this is Kat Steffens with Kat's Trunk, and today we're going to be doing basically meditation bead. And this is actually what I'm talking about. It's a string of beads. There are 5 sections of 10 beads, and another strand where all the beads come together with a tassel at the end is just for meditation and contemplation, because we're all stressed right now. We need something to help us relax. So anyway, this is one I've made for one of my close friends, which is why it's green, but the one we're doing today is going to be in purples. So I'm going to set that aside, and then we're going to get started. So our materials are, I'm using 6, and these are 8mm beads. These are amethyst. And here I have 53 6mm beads, and these are stone. These are dyed quartz. This is a lovely glass bead that I was able to get. It's a bit of what they call lamp work, which I really like it, and a tassel that I've already made. And one of these days I might actually do a tutorial on that. For right now, not so much. Anyway, and our cord that we're going to be using is wax linen. So I've got one piece which is 3 foot in length, and that's actually going to be our core cord. And these 2 pieces are 9 feet in length each, and this is actually going to be our knot tying cord. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually put the majority of the beads on the core cord. That way you get it all done at the start and don't have to worry about stopping and stringing your beads as you go. So I'm gonna get that done and be right back. I'm gonna do this off camera. Okay, and here's the last bead for the last section of the main part. So what this is, so we've got, let's see if you can actually see it all here. We have 5 sections of 10 beads, 10 6mm beads each, and in between each of the 5 sections I've got the 4 8mm beads. So this is just to start. It makes it easier if you've already got your beads strung. You're not having to stop and restring your beads as you go. And as you can see here, that my cord is a little bit discolored, and that's from the fact that these are actually stone beads. So don't worry about any of the dye or stone dust making the end of your cord a little bit dirty. It's not going to be seen, and this is probably the end that gets trimmed off at the, later on anyway, because it could just be, the part of the excess cord. So don't worry about that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to find the center of our cord, not just the center of our cord, but the center of our beads, because we're going to be working from the center outwards from this part of this part of the memory bead strand. I'm just going to move these out of the way because we'll come back to these later. So we've got 5 beads on that side, 5 beads on that side, so we've got 2 full sections, and I want to make sure I have all my beads here as well. So just to make sure that I've got 5 and 5 and big ones, 10 big ones, and another 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All right, so all 50 beads of the center section of the strand right here. So now that I've evened the beads out, let me even out the cord so I can find the center of the cord. And it's there. There's the center of my cord. So I'm just going to stake it down right now so I don't lose track of where that is. So now we're going to take our long cords. These are the cords that are 9 feet long, and these are the cords that the cord sections we're going to be tying with. And this might seem a little confusing right now, but I promise it'll make sense in a little bit. So we're going to match them up because we're going to be starting at their center as well. And there are 2 of them because they're going to be going off tying your knots in either direction from the center. Alrighty, so we got the ends. We're at the ends for our cords, and now we're just backtracking to where the center is. And there's the center. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to match all my cords up. I've got my center, I've got my core cord on one side, I've got the tying cords on either side of it, and I'm actually going to just use a regular paper clamp and hold on to those so I can start tying knots on one direction, the square knots, and showing you how things are going to line up. So let's go ahead and pin this down so it stays where it should stay. And we're going to tie our first knot. So basically what this is going to be is there are 10 sections of 10 beads. There are 5 sections of 10 beads each, sorry. 5 sections of 10 beads each, and in between each bead is a square knot. So we're going to start with our center square knot and work down one side, and then we're going to be able to take our clamp off and work down the other side. So we're going to have a square knot and a bead, and we're going to do a second square knot. And for those of you who've watched my videos before, you know I'm using the S method for making the square knot, and I will, sorry, I got hung up. I'm going to explain that here in just a moment. So that's the first 2 beads. Okay, so S method square knot. You make an S with your left hand cord underneath your core cord that you're tying onto. With your right hand cord, you're coming up from underneath the loop, the loop on that you've made on the right hand side with your left hand cord, and going back down the loop created on the left hand side. Going to pull that snug up, and then with the remainder of the left hand cord hanging out on the left hand side, you're going to pull it over the top of your right hand cord. Right hand cord is coming back over the top of the core cord and down the remaining created loop on the right hand side, and you're going to pull that up snug. Alright, and what that does is it helps you complete a square knot without having to remember, did I do the left P, did I do the right P? This is all done with one shape underneath your core cord to keep you sorted out. And that was a method I discovered years ago when I realized that the left cord really doesn't go back and forth on your piece, and it helps cut down on the probability of tangling. So left S with the left cord, right cord goes underneath the left cord, over the top of the core cord, and down the top loop created by the left cord. And you're going to pull that up. And don't pull it, just tighten your cord just to where it fits under the bead. You don't want to pull it too tight, because then your cord will flop around it'll flop around the side of the bead in a way you don't want it to do. Okay, so then The remainder part of the left cord is over the top of the right cord. It goes over the top of the center cord and back through the remaining loop on the right hand side created by the left cord, and you pull it back up, and that creates another square knot. So you continue this way, single, one bead, one square knot, until you get to the large bead. And this is the 5th bead. This is the center section of beads. There's actually 10 beads in this section. The other 5 are here. We haven't gotten to those yet, but we're just going down one side at a time. And if you need to tie a bit of a knot at the end of your cord, if you're worried that your beads are going to slide off, don't be afraid to do that. I didn't do it this time because I know I've got my beads trapped in a flat surface. Alright, so I've done the first 5 beads, so now I'm about to pull up my first large bead, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give 3 square knots before I pull up the large bead, so there's some distinction between the sections of the beads. So that's 1 square knot, this is the 2nd square knot, first half, second half, and as you've noticed, only my right hand cord travels back and forth for making square knots. And 3 square knots. Then you slide up your 8mm bead and do another 3 square knots. One, two, three, and then we do the next section of 10 6mm beads with a single square knot in between each one of them. From here we're going to fast forward through while I do this, and then I'll come back and talk when I start doing the other side. we finished this side of the loop for the meditation beads. So now we're going to switch to the next side. And something I've noticed is that since I'm right-handed, and when I do a knot, this little bit that indicates that you've got a square knot is always on the right-hand side. Now that we're starting the other direction, you'll notice that when I turn the piece, when we're working it this way, the nubbies were on the right-hand side. Now that we've turned the piece to work it the other direction, the nubbies on the left-hand side. To be able to continue with that, with the nubby part of your square knot to be on the same side, now we have to work the square knots from the right side. So we will be making our S from the right. So using your right hand cord, going under the piece, and this time it's the left hand cord that's going to be traveling back and forth, and the right hand cord is going to stay still. And the only reason we're having to do this reversal on how we do the square knot is to be able to keep that consistency. It'd be nice if I'd actually moved my bead up before I start my square knot. So again, making our S from the right with the right hand cord going under the center cord, and using the left hand cord to come up underneath the right hand cord loop, and going down the loop on the right hand side, and again, remember to advance your bead. Always good to remember to do that part. Alright, then we're pulling our cord up underneath the bead, but not too tight. We want it to nicely frame the bead. And then over the top of the cord, and then over the top and down through the loop. Alright, and we're going to continue this, fast forward to the end so you can see how we're going to get to where the two ends, the two ends of the center section, the center loop, come together. Okay, so that is the end of the center loop for our meditation beads. So with these 6mm and 8mm beads, it makes the loop quite big. So if you want to wrap it around your wrist a couple of times while you're using it, there should be enough room for that to happen. All right, now we're going to actually connect the ends. And you kind of want to make sure that everything is straight when you do that. And the way to make sure you're straight is to have your nubbies going the same direction. So here on the right hand side, the nubby is on the left, and on the left hand side, the nubby is on the right. That means the whole strand is going the same direction. These two cords coming off your final square knot are what you're going to be making a bit of a surgeon's knot with. So it's not a complete surgeon's knot, it's just going to be the wrapping portion for the first half of a surgeon's knot. So you're just going to wrap around a couple of times and pull things together a bit, not all the way. So now this is the point where we're going to be adding this bead. And this is our focal point bead. Basically, it's the transition from one direction of our piece to the other. And fortunately, this bead is big enough to be able to take both ends of the wax linen cord into it. So I pull it up as tight as I can, and then I tighten this knot a bit more. You don't want it to be overly tight. You still want to see some of the definition. So it's just a matter of wiggling things around until it starts looking correct. Okay, so this is going to be the fun part. I'm going to put a couple of push pins in here to hold things steady so you can see what I'm going to do. So we're going to need to start stepping down our cord population at this time, but not just yet. We're going to tie a few knots first before we start stepping down the population, because as you can tell, we've got two cords coming out of the bottom of this focal bead, and both of these cords will not fit through any of our other beads. So there will be a point where we're going to reduce this cord population from 2 to 1, but not just yet. So now we're going to take all four of our strands, and we're going to, in bundles of 2 each, we're going to do our we're going to do 3 square knots below this focal point bead, and then we're going to start stepping down. So we're going to be working from the left side with our S, and this is just when you have to be a little bit extra patient. Hold on to your core and just ease things around until you're happy with how this bead is sitting between your cords, and then go ahead and finish your first square knot. Now comes the fun part. We're going to need to trim off one of these cords because only one of them will be going through our bead. So they're both about the same length. I would just choose to trim off the shorter of the two. right, then we're going to string on our next bead, which is finding the hole in the natural stone is always a challenge. There it goes. So that little nubby, you're just going to let it tuck itself back up behind things. Also, at this point, we want to start stepping down our tying cords. And we can't just nip one off right now, because then that's just gonna, it's just going to hang out there and look weird. So we're going to embed it. We're going to embed the extra cords alongside of our core cord right now, and they're just going to kind of nestle in alongside of our bead, and then you'll see what I mean. So let's go ahead and do our square knots. So we're going to do 3 more square knots. And you just work on the cords. And this time you do want to try to pull it really, really tight, because the excess cords are going to make the knot look bigger to be comparable to the size on the previous section, even when you pull it really tight. But the reason you're trying to pull it as tight as possible at this point is so it really hangs on to these 2 cords you're going to be snipping off here in a minute, so you don't have an issue with things pulling out, which would not be a good thing. So that's 2. And 3. Also, something you could choose to do is to make sure you're not going to run out of core cord, because as you can tell, the core cord now that the beads are going on is getting a bit on the short side, and it's a bit of a challenge to keep up the S method with being able to get the cord to go a full S behind the short little nubby cord. So what you can do, and which is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to snip off 2 of these 3 cords. I'm going to leave myself a long one for my new core cord and just snip off the other 2 as close up as possible. And don't worry about these little nubs right there, because that's going to just wind up pushing up against your beads. So I've got there's going to be 3 more of these beads and 1 of that. So I'm going to go ahead and string all of these, the remaining beads, onto my cord. Sometimes it's just a little bit of a challenge to find that hole when it just sort of disappears in the color of the bead. There it is. But the good thing about the waxed linen is you don't have to use a needle to thread it through the beads, provided the beads have got the right size hole in them. and the wax linen goes through really nicely. If you ever find a point when you're having issues with getting your linen through a bead just because you've been stringing a lot of beads and things are getting a little dirty and lax, you can always twist the end of the wax linen to get more of the wax to actually come to the surface and, you know, create a stiffer bit for going through your beads. All right, just a little tip there. All right, so we're done with that. Gave myself an extra bead just in case I was going to have an issue with any of the holes. So yay, didn't need the extra bead. Okay, so that just pushes up against those knots, and those little nubs, they'll actually just get embedded within your piece when you start tying your next knot. Again, this time you do want to try to pull it to get it, push that bead up against everything ahead of it, just to help give a little more security on what you've just trimmed off. But you don't want to do it so tight that you're going to lose this framing. You want to make sure that your cord is still going to frame your bead nicely. So again, this section is going to be the 3 6mm beads. So there's going to be a single knot between each bead. So there's the first one and the second one. And again, you can see that I've started doing my square knots from the left side for the S. It's just, for me, being right-handed, it's just the way I do it all the time. But for this piece, when you're going from one direction to the other direction, you do have to do your S basis from the right hand side. But now that I don't have to worry about that, I'm working it from the left. Okay, so I've got my 3 beads on, and so I'm going to be pulling up the next of the large beads. So I'm going to do 3 square knots in between these and this bead. Now I'm going to do 7 square knots. So I actually have an area for where I can attach this, and you'll see how I'm going to do that momentarily. And this is 7 square knots. All right, I'm going to pull the pins out of this because I have to move things around a bit. So now I'm going to attach the tassel. So the way we're going to do that is I've got the tassel and a jump ring. I'm actually going to take all 3 of my remaining yarns. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these because I really don't need all of this length to finish what I have left, and to make it easier on you to watch what I'm going to do. And I think that's more than enough cord to finish with. So I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so with the remaining 3 cords, I'm going to go down through the jump ring of the tassel, eventually. There it goes. My hands are really sticky right now from all the wax on the cords. All right, what I'm going to do is I've got the cord going through the jump ring on the tassel, and I'm going up at least 2 knots and bending my cord back on itself. And what I've done here is I've got one full knot through the loop, the second knot, one full knot through the jump ring. The second knot back is kind of bending in the middle of the jump ring. So I'm going, at this point, I'm flipping the piece over and turning it upside down. I'm going to put a pin through the jump ring so you can see that I've tacked this down. So I've got my knots coming through, and so I'm going to be doing a couple of square knots going this direction over the top of the square knots that are already there, and trapping in this remaining center cord. So this is how we're going to be able to finish this off. And yes, I'm going to violate my S knot method here for a little bit, just because it's a little tight on space. So you're just being careful to pull things down, but try to keep your knots centered. All right, so you just have to work, because the wax linen cord is not as slippy slidey, you actually have to manipulate it to where you push it up where you want it for tightening, because it's not going to slide into place. You've got to push it to where you need it and then pull it tight as you can, because this is actually how you're finishing off the piece, because we're going to start trimming off some of these cords soon, and you'll see how it goes. All right. So that's one square knot. Come on. Again, I've got wax all over my fingers right now from the wax linen, so things are just sticking to my hands, not actually behaving itself as good as it should. Okay, so that's 2 square knots. And this is when I want to trim off the center piece, because this way I'm going to do a 3rd square knot here, but with this trimmed off, any remaining little nub is going to get buried within this 3rd square knot that I'm going to do now. So here comes the 3rd square knot, and this is actually the last square knot for your piece. Then we get the fun part of embedding the ends of the cord into the remaining bits of the piece, which is always the most fun part. Is that sarcastic? It's okay. All right, so now we have these 2 remaining cords hanging out here, and we want to get them embedded. So that's why I have this needle, and this is actually a tapestry needle. And the reason I'm using the tapestry needle is because it's got a really big eye in it, and it makes it easier to thread the wax linen onto. And sometimes it's easier to bend the wax linen in half and force that folded edge through the needle than it is to try to flatten the wax linen out and force it through. That way you don't have to worry about missing any of the threads from the wax linen. So what we're going to do now is we're going to embed this cord in this column. And what you're going to do are the knots below where your cord ends. You're going to take your push pin and create a channel for your needle to go through. And it doesn't really need to go very far. You just need to, I would try to force it through at least 2 of the knots. You are trying to get behind the cords. Okay. So that's roughly 2 of the knots. It's not the very end. So we've created a channel here to pull our cords through. Pull the pin out, and then you can drive your needle down through that gap. You really need to make that gap because this is a blunt needle that you're using. And again, your fingers are quite waxy at this point. Hold on just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I had to go get my silicone pliers to help me pull this through because my fingers are so waxy I cannot actually grip the needle. And I'm using this pair of pliers because it's got the silicone pads on it that will help save the needle from being scratched up from other pliers. So you're just pulling your wax linen through, and then we're going to do the second side, the second strand. So again, use your needle to make a fold in your wax linen, smush it down, squish it as flat as possible, and force it through the eye of the needle. And again, with your push pin, you're going to create a channel below where, see where the cord comes out right there, where the cord comes out. So it's coming out from under that nub. So we want to actually come below and just work a channel down through the knots. And we're staying on the back side of the piece because you could see the pin is not coming through on the front side. So we want to stay on the back side here, create a nice little channel. I'm going to pull the pin out, go back to the needle, and let the needle follow the channel created by the pin. Again, my fingers are very waxy right now. It's making it hard to hold on to the needle. And it's just a matter of wiggling it through because you do notice that there's a bit of volume created there at the eye of the needle where the wax linen folds over into it, and you just have to keep working it, just pulling it gently. Don't try to do it too fast, just wiggling it through because you don't want to destroy any of your knot work. You just have to be patient. When it comes through fast. All right, so we've pulled it through. Our wax linen is secure, and we could just nip it off. You don't have to burn it. Well, you can't burn it because it's a wax linen. It's a natural fiber. So you do want to spend some time on squeezing it and making sure that your cord is definitely going to stay well in there, and you're done. So now you have meditation beads to help you de-stress after making it. Sorry. Anyway, so this was a lot of fun to do. I really enjoyed doing this for you guys, and I hope you enjoy doing it yourself. I will have this as a kit on my Etsy page, so check out my Etsy page. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Bye.